And let's be honest, the deep-sea creatures living down there probably don't have much interest in the physics of steel compression. Imagine being a deep-sea fish and seeing a steel ball float past you. You're not going to ponder the effects of pressure on its structure, you're more likely to just ignore it if it's not something edible. Interestingly, the compression effect on the steel ball isn't permanent. If you were to bring the ball back up to the surface, it would return to its original shape because the pressure would drop back to normal. But again, this change is so minuscule that only engineers with precision instruments would be able to measure it. So, if compression isn't visually impressive, what about speed? Initially, I assumed that a steel ball would sink slowly and smoothly through the water, its descent gently resisted by the water's density. However, that's not quite the case. As it turns out, a steel ball moving through water quickly reaches what's called its terminal velocity. This is the speed at which the force of gravity pulling the ball down is balanced by the resistance of the water pushing against it, along with a few other factors. After crunching some numbers, I'll spare you the complex formulas. The terminal velocity of the steel ball in water would be about 15 meters per second, or roughly 49 feet per second. The speed of a steel ball sinking to the bottom of the Mariana Trench is comparable to a car driving through a city, pretty fast. Especially for any marine life that might find itself in its path. But let's assume the steel ball won't harm any creatures and won't slow anything down on its way down. Under these conditions, the steel ball would reach the bottom of the trench in about 12 minutes. When it finally hits the seabed, it would likely get stuck in the silt, maybe even creating a small funnel in the process. This could very well be one of the most exciting things to happen in the Mariana Trench in recent years. But what if we switched out the steel ball for something more common, like a tennis ball? No, that's too boring, you need something more impressive. How about a bowling ball? Bowling balls are typically made of various types of plastic, sometimes mixed with rubber, ceramics, and even glass, but usually, they don't contain metal. Because of this, many bowling balls are quite buoyant and will float on the surface of the water. For a bowling ball to actually sink, it needs to weigh at least 5.5 kilograms, more than 12 pounds. But let's take this experiment even further. Imagine dropping a 7 kilogram, 15 pound, bowling ball into the Mariana Trench. How fast would it sink to the bottom? With a sinking speed of about 1.3 meters, 4.2 feet, per second, it would take around 2 hours and 20 minutes to reach the bottom. You could toss the ball into the water, go watch a movie, and by the time the credits roll, the ball would have just reached the bottom. A 5 kilogram, 11 pound, ball would take about 4.5 hours to make the journey. But if the ball were made of iron, it would reach the bottom in just 30 minutes. A lead bowling ball would take about 23 minutes, and a ball made of pure gold would hit the bottom in just 17 minutes. Why not drop one in for science? So, now we have a bunch of bowling balls sitting at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. But what will happen to that first steel ball after it's been down there for a week, a month, or even a year? Surprisingly, a steel ball could lie at the bottom of the trench for a very long time. In such deep water, rust doesn't form in the usual way. However, certain bacteria that thrive on metals and oxidize them could be present. These organisms have been slowly eating away at the Titanic for years, which rests at a depth of about 3.8 kilometers, 2.3 miles, a shallow depth compared to the Mariana Trench. But to these bacteria, depth doesn't matter, they don't care about pressure when they're so tiny. It's possible these bacteria would find our steel ball and eventually eat through it, causing it to disintegrate and mix with the water and silt at the bottom. A plastic bowling ball, on the other hand, would remain intact. However, any synthetic materials would need to be retrieved to avoid negatively impacting the environment. So, if you ever decide to try this experiment for real, remember to clean up after yourself. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And click the bell icon to receive notifications about me. Speaking of mile-high bathrooms, did you know there's actually a secret way to unlock an airplane toilet from the outside? If a kid gets stuck in the bathroom or you're just feeling mischievous, though I don't recommend it unless you want to be kicked off the flight, you can unlock the door with just one finger. Most airplane bathroom doors have exterior locks hidden behind the metal lavatory sign, just like this one. It's designed for flight attendants to use in case of emergencies. To unlock it, simply lift the lavatory sign, slide the knob to the unlocked position, and then, if you're up to no good, make a run for it before the flight attendants catch you. Now, let's dig into another topic that's always up for discussion: airplane food. Everyone knows that in-flight meals are notoriously awful, but have you ever wondered why? What's the deal with airplane food, anyway? Well, here's the scoop. In-flight meals are typically prepared on the ground by industrial catering facilities located near the airport. These meals are usually prepared between 12 and 72 hours before the flight. Contrary to popular belief, most airplane meals aren't frozen. Instead, they're blast chilled and then transported to the aircraft, where flight attendants heat and serve them on board. Some luxury airlines, like Etihad Airways, even have their own in-flight chefs and kitchens. Yet, despite all this effort, airplane food still doesn't measure up to a 5-star restaurant meal on the ground. So, what makes airplane food taste so bad? It turns out it's not the food's fault, it's basic human biology. The humidity levels in airplane cabins are as low as 10%, which is even drier than the Sahara Desert. When the air is this dry, our sinuses become dehydrated, which affects our sense of taste and smell. After a short time in the cabin, your ability to taste sweet flavors drops by 15 to 20%, while salty flavors can be dulled by 20 to 30%. To counteract this, some airlines add extra salt and sugar to their meals, which means you're probably consuming more calories than you realize. But don't worry, there's a trick to make airplane food taste better. Put on a pair of noise-canceling headphones. Studies have shown that loud background noise can dull our sense of taste, so drowning out the engine's hum can help your taste buds get back to work. So next time you're up in the air and dreading that tasteless meal, just slip on those headphones, and you might find your food a little more flavorful. But it's not just passengers who have food challenges to think about when flying. The crew also has some unique food issues to chew over in the sky. There are some very specific rules about what pilots can and can't eat while they're on the job, and for good reason. Pilots and co-pilots are advised not to eat the same meals while working as a precaution against both of them getting food poisoning. If one pilot's meal turns out to be bad and makes them sick, the other pilot can still take over. But there's also a hierarchy when it comes to what pilots eat. On some airlines, the pilot might get a meal from the first-class menu, while the co-pilot might have to settle for a business-class meal. That must make for a pretty awkward dinner date. Speaking of awkward situations, imagine being stuck in a tiny cockpit for hours with a co-pilot you really don't get along with. Given the high stakes of their job, it's no surprise that airline pilot is often ranked as one of the most stressful professions in the world. But with so much at risk, airlines take steps to avoid pairing up pilots who don't get along. In fact, in the industry, it's considered a matter of life and death. To reduce in-flight tensions, each captain, first officer, and second officer gets a do not pair list where they can name co-workers they'd rather not fly with. These requests are submitted through a monthly schedule, and the approved list is fed into the airline's scheduling system to ensure that two pilots who don't get along never end up in the same cockpit. While this might seem a bit extreme, a distracted pilot could lead to a serious accident, especially during critical moments like takeoff and landing, when full attention is required. If only every job could guarantee such pleasant co-workers. Now, let's talk about the safest seat on a plane. Contrary to what movies and TV shows might suggest, air travel is actually one of the safest modes of transportation. Your odds of dying in a commercial airline crash are a staggering 1 in 3.37 billion. Yet, despite these facts, nearly 1 in 3 Americans has a fear of flying. This fear has led many to wonder where the safest spot is on a plane in the event of an emergency. Well, Time magazine conducted an analysis of data from 17 plane crashes over the last 35 years to find the answer. Time magazine found that, historically, seats in the back third of a plane had a 68% average survival rate in crashes, compared to 62% in the front section and 61% in the middle third. You might think that an aisle seat would be one of the safest spots since it gives quick access to emergency exits. However, the data shows that aisle seats in the middle third of the plane are actually the worst place to be in a crash, with a survival rate of only 56%. On the other hand, the safest spot is the middle seat in the rear of the plane, which offers a 72% chance of surviving a crash landing. Those are pretty good odds, but let's hope none of us ever has to test them. Now, for some skybound secrets. If you've ever sat by the window on a flight, you might have noticed a tiny hole at the bottom of the window. While it looks small, this hole is actually one of the plane's most important safety features. But why is it so crucial? As planes climb higher, the air pressure outside drops, so airplanes are designed to keep the cabin pressure at a comfortable, breathable level. This difference in pressure puts a lot of stress on the windows, which need to be incredibly strong. Unlike a regular single-pane window that would easily shatter at high altitudes, airplane windows are made of 3 layers of durable acrylic. The outer pane keeps the elements out and maintains cabin pressure. If something happens to this outer pane, the second layer acts as a backup. The inner pane, closest to the passengers, is there to protect the other layers and prevent damage from passengers' curious hands. The tiny hole, called a bleed hole, is in the middle pane and helps balance the air pressure between the middle and outer panes. It also prevents the windows from fogging up or icing over, ensuring we can enjoy the view from above. Speaking of airplane interiors, you might have seen those small red or black triangles on the cabin walls. These markers indicate to the crew which window provides the best view of the wings, allowing them to check for any issues with the wing or engine. So, if you're sitting by one of these triangles, don't worry if a flight attendant suddenly starts looking over your shoulder, they're just doing a quick safety check. Besides visual cues, sounds are also a key part of in-flight safety and operations. Frequent flyers will recognize the familiar chime sounds. While many of us know a chime usually signals it's time to fasten your seatbelt, these sounds can actually mean much more. Different airlines use chimes in various ways, but there are some common patterns. A single chime might be the pilot warning the crew about upcoming turbulence, or it could just mean he's asking for a coffee. 2 consecutive chimes usually signal that the plane is approaching 10,000 feet. However, 3 or more chimes often indicate a more serious issue, such as a severely ill passenger or a warning for extreme turbulence. So, if you hear a lot of chimes going off like a club DJ's beat, it might be time to brace yourself, or maybe dance it out. And then there's the difference between flying economy and first class. Economy class is often associated with crying babies, cramped seats, and no legroom, a real stairway to hell. Meanwhile, first class promises a much more luxurious experience, complete with private seats, endless champagne, and chocolate-covered strawberries. No wonder a first-class flight is on so many people's bucket lists. The luxurious service offered in first class might seem perfect for getting that much-needed rest on a long-haul flight. But is the sky-high price really worth it? When compared to business class, the next best option, it doesn't seem so. There are quite a few perks you might think are exclusive to first-class flyers that are actually available in business class as well. Both first-class and business class passengers on many airlines enjoy high-quality multi-course meals, often served on fine china and glassware, along with plush pillows and blankets. Some business class cabins even offer complimentary pajamas. These days, many airlines are focusing on enhancing their business class services, with some even planning to phase out first class entirely. Business class pods that offer privacy are becoming more common. Really, the most noticeable difference between first and business class is that first class may offer a slightly larger seat or a private suite, plus a few extra menu items like champagne and whiskey. However, the steep difference in price doesn't quite match the small difference in service. On average, a business class ticket costs about twice as much as an economy seat, while a first class ticket can cost up to 6 times more than an economy fare. Personally, I'd rather save the money and splurge on a nice hotel room upgrade at my destination. What do you think? Hit the like button if you're team first class, and subscribe if you'd prefer a fancy hotel. Or why not treat yourself to both? After all, you're on vacation. Now, let's talk about sky sleepers. Long-haul flights can be exhausting for passengers. But have you ever wondered how flight attendants always manage to look so alert and fresh? Next time you're on a long-haul flight, keep an eye out for a mystery door that looks like a regular storage closet. These doors actually lead to a secret room. Up a narrow flight of stairs, flight attendants can access what's called a rest compartment, specifically designed for them to get some much-needed sleep. These rest compartments are usually located in the overhead areas of long-haul aircraft, one at the back for flight attendants and one at the front for pilots. Each bed comes equipped with a pillow, duvet, and a safety belt that must be fastened when a crew member decides to take a nap. Known among airline employees as controlled rests, flight attendants have a set amount of time to rest depending on the flight length and are woken up by their fellow crew members through an interphone when their break is over. Some top-tier airlines, like Singapore Airlines, really pamper their crew with luxurious private cabins for rest, complete with silk pillowcases. Pilots, on the other hand, often get their own private quarters at the front of the plane. These usually include 2 spacious sleeping compartments, 2 business class seats, a closet, and a lavatory. So, the next time you're wondering where that friendly flight attendant who was serving your drink has disappeared to, they might just be right above your head, catching some sleep. All jokes aside, it's crucial for the crew, especially the pilots, to be well rested. This is highlighted by some shocking statistics. In a survey conducted by the British Airline Pilots Association, a staggering 84% of pilots admitted that their ability to fly had been compromised due to fatigue, and 56% even confessed to having fallen asleep while in charge of a plane. In May 2021, one pilot on a commercial flight from Cairns to Redcliffe in Australia fell asleep for 40 minutes mid-air and accidentally overflew his destination by 70 miles before waking up. Thankfully, most commercial airplanes have autopilot systems to manage altitude and other controls, so pilots don't have to be at the helm for the entire flight. But it's still incredibly dangerous for them to fall asleep, especially in case of an emergency. Definitely something to add to my list of reasons to grip the armrests on my next flight. Now, let's talk about a more uncomfortable topic: death in the air. While it's not pleasant to think about, people do pass away in all sorts of places, including 30,000 feet in the sky. Though extremely rare, flight crews must be prepared for the possibility of an in-flight death. If a passenger dies during a flight, the crew usually has to wait until the plane lands to remove the body. In some cases, the deceased passenger might get a final upgrade to the quieter first-class cabin. If there's no way to move the body, the crew will secure it with a seatbelt and cover it with a blanket for the safety and comfort of other passengers. Singapore Airlines has taken things a step further. Instead of the cover them with a blanket method, they equipped their fleet of Airbus A340-500s with special compartments designed to store an average-sized body in the event of an in-flight death. These compartments, sometimes referred to as corpse cupboards, which sounds like a death metal band name, by the way, were specifically installed because these planes operate some of the longest non-stop flights in the world. The flight from Singapore to John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City, for instance, takes about 18 hours and 40 minutes. I'd certainly prefer having a dedicated compartment for such an unfortunate event rather than being the flight attendant who has to ask a first-class passenger if they'd mind sitting next to a deceased person for 18 hours. Which of these flight secrets surprised you the most? And do you have any of your own to share? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you for flying with Top Amazing Fact.